few other tools to quickly mention. We've got gels which help recolor the light you have. This just goes in front of the fixture. If you have a light which can only output one color temperature or one color, this can help sort of bring it back to where you need it to be. My key light right here outputs 5600 Kelvin, which is daylight or approximately daylight. I might potentially want to light a moonlight scene and want it to feel a little bit cooler. I could throw in perhaps a quarter CTB or a half CTB, depending on what my camera Kelvin is set at, and help sort of cool down the light a little bit. So you've got your orange and blue gels, which can change the color temperature. You do also have specialty colored gels. If you want to create, maybe you've got a very moody, very stylized scene that you want to have a red light in, you could put a red gel in and change the color of your light there. You've got C47s, which basically attach your gels to barn doors or to the fixture itself. Basically a closed peg which you can clip on. You've got Scrims, which help bring down the level of light. These are really commonly found for a lot of these old school lights, especially ones that aren't dimmable. So your HMIs aren't dimmable. You might put in a Scrim to help reduce the quantity of light coming out. They don't really exist in the LED world, however. The all-important diffusion, bounce, and negative fill. This is a really, really critical one. If nothing else, I think learning how to really craft with light with diffusion, bounce, and negative fill would be a really, really helpful skill. You can use the sun on its own to craft a really great image if you use these three main tools. First up, diffusion is basically something that goes in between your light source and your subject. So you've got different thicknesses of diffusion. You've also got different colors like bleached or unbleached muslin. A really cost-effective option if you're looking to create a great layer of diffusion is shower curtains. You'll even find this on high-budget films. They'll still use a shower curtain type material. It's a really nice sort of frosted layer which will help knock back the hardness of your light, whilst also not impacting too much on the overall output. Then we've got bounce. Bounce light is a really, really great way to soften your light. So there's a few different ways of bouncing. You can set up a bounce board, a bounce card. You could even set up a sheet if you want to. That's another really cost-effective way of bouncing light, is actually just grabbing a big bed sheet. Or you could, if you're in a space with white walls, you might potentially decide to use one of the walls as a bounce. These two tools together can create a really great technique called a book light, which I'm sure you've heard before, which is simply pointing your fixture into the bounce, which then goes through the diffusion before hitting your subject. A really, really great way to create incredibly soft light. Finally, you've got negative fill. Negative fill is basically some sort of black material which helps cut light. So we have got cutters, which is a black material. It can be black wood or it can be a black material which goes on a metal frame. This helps cut the light from spilling on specific areas. You might want to put this if part of your scene needs to make sure that there is shade there and the light doesn't spill all the way over. You could bring in a cutter. But then we also can use negative fill quite creatively to create a bit of shape and shadow. I'll often find if I'm working in an environment where there is a lot of white walls that I'll need a lot of negative fill. The main reason for this is as soon as you bring up all that much of a level, much of a light level, it sometimes bounces all around the room and you can create a very high-key, flat look. And this may not be appropriate for the scene that you're shooting. Great way of bringing back in that contrast, bringing back in that dimension to a face is by setting up negative fill. So you've got, of course, floppies, which are those 4x4 frames, which sort of open up to create sort of a 4x8. And you can bring that in really nice and close to your subject to create a lot of shade. You can do this with anything though. If you've got a big blackout curtain, sound blankets, like black sound blankets work, it doesn't really matter. As long as it's black and it's big, you can cut light with it. Keep in mind of if your light is bouncing in the first place, you can't create shade out of nothing. If I am outside and light is not bouncing from anywhere and I put a small black card in front of something, I'm probably not going to get too much shade. Whereas if I'm in a room with a lot of white walls and I can see it's clearly bouncing off this wall, I can actually cut a lot with that. You can create a little bit of shade in an outdoor environment, but be mindful of where you're positioned because you'll probably need to bring in a massive amount of negative fill to create much of a difference. If you just have a very small amount, it may not get your desired effect. Now these three tools are so invaluable. There's so many different things that you can do with them: diffusion, bounce, and negative fill, and we're going to dive into that later. I just want to quickly say, if you are starting out and you're wanting a cost-effective way of getting all of these three, there is the perfect tool for you, which is a 5-in-1 reflector. It's cheap as chips, and it is worth its weight in gold. They do break easily. I do go through them all the time, but they're a great option if you want to keep things small and light. You can get very large ones sometimes, but basically they have an inside layer, which is diffusion. They have an outside, which is white, and outside, which is black. They also have a silver and gold if you want a harder light, which you can bounce back. That is an option for you, but super, super useful tool. Use it all the time.